You're listening to Journey for Truth with internationally known medium, Tai Yi practitioner, and radio host Tami Urbanek.
Hello and welcome to Journey for Truth on iHeartRadio and YouTube. I'm Tami Urbanek. Thank you so much for joining me. Journey for Truth Radio is always on demand and with many new episodes. If you go to journeyfortruthradio.com, you can sign up for the free newsletter, which will notify you of each new episode. And also there's more information on that website about this show, Journey for Truth. On JonahLifeInstitute.com, you'll see the information for the next Denver seminar, which will take place February 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2017. It's titled Healing an Injured Heart, A Journey for the Wounded Spirit. This one is going to cover healing injuries, pain, but also opening up our passion for life, our passion for living, and our passion for our work. Right now, it's at a discounted price at JonahLifeInstitute.com, so you'll want to go there very soon to sign up for that, and you can register on that site. My guest this week is Omer Iqbal. Omer was born and educated in Pakistan, and he moved here right before the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Listen to his story today on his struggle here due to the terrorist attacks, due to people's judgments, and then also coming from Muslim territory and people's preconceived notions, and also his desire to live a very joyful life. Omer, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's great having you here. Now tell us, what did occur for you right after 9/11?
So after 9/11, President George Bush's administration, they set up this program, which we kind of informally call Muslim Registry. The purpose was for every Muslim, when they were leaving the country, coming back, and at specific intervals to go to a government office and register in person. There was some fingerprinting, there were some questions being asked, and officially they did not name it Muslim Registry. It was not targeted officially at Muslims, but the way they managed it was they created a list of countries. And except for North Korea, all the other countries were Muslim countries. So whenever you travel to any of those countries and you came back, you basically were automatically in that list. Or if you were born in any of those countries, you were also on that list. And because I'm from Pakistan, every time I went back home and came back, we were automatically in this, process of having to register. Now, it's not the part of registration. I mean, that itself is a problem, but it's also the bureaucracy that came with it. There were times when I had to wait for 4 hours on airport just to get registered. I had been through almost like a 24-hour flight, and my wife and I, we were waiting, and there was only one guy, and there were I think 20-25 people ahead of us. And we were young at that time, and we were able to sort of bear through it. But now that we have kids, I think that even the thought that we'll have to do that just scares us. I mean, you come out of a 24-hour flight, and then somebody tells you have to wait 4 hours on airport without food or anything, because it was a small room, and we were just put in that room, and we could not leave. And this still happens with me. I mean, it happened last year in May. I had gone to Amsterdam for a work-related conference, and I came back. I had to wait for about an hour because they were doing some background checks. They don't do our fingerprinting anymore, but they have to run a bunch of background checks. And at the end of it, the officer came to me and he said, I apologize. We are trying to get any information about you from all of these agencies. And since we have a fairly long record of yours, we'll wait for an hour, and after an hour I think I can just let you go. And so it's very weird. Sorry, go ahead.
What led you and your wife to having to move back to Pakistan?
So this was back in 2005. There was one case where we had been living here for about 2-3 years. For 2 years we had not gone back home. And we really felt like, we will just go back home and visit our family. And so we traveled back to Pakistan. And at that time, my visa had expired. And so we were told there is some additional processing that needs to be done for the visa. And what that meant was that the consular in the embassy had approved our visa, but they needed to send it back to Department of Homeland Security. This is back in end of 2005. And so they send it to Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Homeland Security then sends it out to some 20, 25 intelligence agencies. And each of those agencies is supposed to come back if they have any information about me which can bar my entry into the United States. And so that process did not really have an end date. So we applied in December of 2005. And in May of 2005, we were told that all the checks have passed and we should come in and get our visa. And we had made this application from Vancouver in British Columbia. So essentially, we went from here to Vancouver. We said, we'll visit Vancouver, we'll go around British Columbia, then we'll go back home. And we'll come back to British Columbia and then enter the US after getting our visa in the US consulate at Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And so we fly back. And by the time we got to the embassy, which was about a week and a half after we had been told our visa had been approved, my visa had been approved. My wife did not have this problem. It's only with, I think, males between certain ages. So I was told that my visa was approved. And so we come back. And by the time we get to the consulate, the consular says, we need to run this check again because within last 1.5 weeks, there is some new information about you that has been received by the system. And then he started apologizing that it's not in his control. And if he could, he would have issued the visa. And so we were sent back from Vancouver back to Pakistan. And then it took us same process happened, I think, once more in September, same year. And then in January of the following year, which is around 2007, they gave us the visa. They issued the visa finally.
So you were essentially there. You were back home in Pakistan a whole year.
For more than a year, and at that time, it was hard for us because even though we were technically on a temporary visa, but when you come to work, you end up renting an apartment. You have furniture, you have car. You kind of build a lifestyle,
right?
And if you were told ahead of time that, for example, when your permit is up, you just leave, you sort of plan for a move. Mm-hmm. So we had everything here. I was still paying my rent. I was in Pakistan. Luckily, Microsoft allowed me to work remotely. So I was still able to work and get the salary and still pay my rents. But around, after about 6 to 8 months, we just could not make it work because I had to stay up at night. The time difference is 12 hours.
Right.
So every night at 8 p.m. I would start working and I would work till 5, 6 in the morning.
So Microsoft, you worked for Microsoft and they needed to fight to get you back to the United States because of your position with that company. How were they able to help you fight through this red tape?
So it is not clear because essentially what Microsoft did was they hired a company in Canada to process my visa, actually follow through on my visa, and that company was trying to get in touch. I believe they probably had some contacts with Department of Homeland Security, and they were trying to push and get the status because I would get queries from them, I would get updates from them. But their process was a bit opaque. Having said that, Microsoft had to spend a bunch of money to get me back in, which all seems unnecessary, and it's a loss for a US company anyway. I mean, they're going and spending a lot of money on these immigration red tapes. So, but I don't have the details of how much money they had to spend. But I know that this company was at least there for about 4 to 6 months trying to get my visa processed.
They must have really wanted you back to work to go through that expense.
It looks like it, yeah, because even at that time we were trying to hire people as well, and it was not an easy situation because at that time I was a manager and I had to hire and build my team. and we would open up positions, and it would be months, sometimes years before we would get somebody we could hire. So I think it was also the need of the company at the time.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. Now, everything that you're talking about, the red tape, the bureaucracy, the difficulty with getting your visa information completed in a timely fashion, some people here in the United States, as I'm sure you're very aware, would say, well, that needs to happen in order to not allow violence, to not allow terrorism. Or and some people might say, well, there's a limit to it. This is a little ridiculous what you had to go through. So really, this next portion of our discussion here is on Islam and people's perhaps misunderstandings of Islam. I can say that for myself, I've not studied Islam. I only know little bits of pieces of information here and there. And I know that a lot of the information that's presented is probably false. And the only way for me to know that would be if I actually studied the information. So first, does Islam promote violence against non-Muslims?
So I'll say what, one of the guys, he's a scholar in Islam, and he framed it in a very nice way. I think I'll just go with that, and then I'll add my opinion to it. So the way he framed it was, religion usually, a major part of religion usually is about identity. A lot of people identify themselves as Muslims because they were born Muslims. A lot of people are Christians, even if they do not practice the religion, just because they were born Christians. And I think that's a very important way to think about it, because you can really find Muslims who are kind of secular. And I believe I'm a practicing Muslim. In fact, when I was stuck in Pakistan, I think if it wasn't for the spiritual aspect of the religion, it would have been much, much worse for me than it was. And it's not only that incident. I mean, there are multiple times in one's life when you are kind of broken and torn apart, and this happens at work, this happens in personal relationships, and religion really helps me. So there's a spiritual aspect of it. Now, coming down to violence, the way I think about it, after stating the identity part, is that there is a question about what the religion preaches and a question about how Muslims act. And the reason I differentiate that is that Muslims are about the identity, people who identify themselves as Muslims. Whereas I will argue in many cases that they're doing things that Islam does not preach. A very simple example is that a lot of terrorists, it was found that they were, before their whatever acts they committed, they were either in nightclubs or they were drinking, everything that Islam does not really, for the most lenient people, it does not like. But if you go with majority of the Muslims, they will know that this is not allowed in Islam, yet they will go and do those activities. And so it's the same case with violence. People will go and commit violence, and they'll call themselves Muslims, and they will even justify it. But if I were to talk about it, I'll say Islam does not promote violence at all. In fact, there are, a few days ago, I was reading about this practice. There was a Hindu practice in the subcontinent, in Pakistan, what is Pakistan, in India and Bangladesh now, where Hindus used to burn widows. Actually, widows would burn themselves for spiritual and religious reasons when their husbands died.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was a practice. It's called sati. So and in India for a long time there were Muslim rulers and the Mughals, and for them it was a legal problem. How do you allow Hindus to practice something? And there's a discussion about whether Hinduism requires this or not, and a lot of Hindu scholars argue it's not part of Hinduism, but it was still an established practice there. So the Mughals had this problem of trying to figure out, should we allow them to continue with this practice because it's their religious belief, and we should not intervene into their religious or personal issues. And so if you look at that history, you would say that if it was ISIS ruling that area, they would just go and kill everybody anyway, right?
Yes.
They're not going to have these kind of discussions. So I think the religious history of Islam is very rich. I will argue, I have a blog on which I actually write down what Muslims are taught, Muslim kids are taught. And there's no way I can see Islam or any Islamic source being used to justify violence.
I completely agree that I think in almost, if not all, religions have a group of people who feel justified to act on violence, to act in violent ways and violent manners, that they will always have a reason. Like there are many KKK members or former KKK members who claim to be Christian. And in many people within, or if not most people within the Christian community will say their promotions of violence do not represent our values. And I would have to agree to that on a whole. So I think that when the information is presented by the media, Muslims this, Muslims that, Islam this, Islam that, that we're really being fed inaccurate and misleading information that keeps us separated, that keeps us at odds with each other and in a state of fear. So on that note, what are the core concepts of Islam?
Before I go, I think there's one more thing about, I'll just add to your media comment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think even if you look at the media, I think I have come to see that there are groups of I would say biases. So there is certainly some commentators who will who see that there's a difference between the peace-loving Muslims versus any criminal, Muslim or Christian or whatever, but within Islam is Muslim criminals and terrorists. And so they kind of tend to differentiate. And then there is a group that will just say, and it's even the word association that's a problem. Like the minute you say radical Islam, that's a term I heard for the first time when I came to the US. In fact, I came to the US and for the first time I heard my holy book was used on TV to tell that it's my belief to go and somehow cause injury to non-Muslims. And I had never heard that opinion in Pakistan. The only extremes I had heard were about were only in the context of Israel and Palestine, and that was also because a lot of Arabs advocate Palestinian rights or the fact that they're being affected. But outside of that discussion, this kind of rhetoric that Islam tells me to go and cause injury or harm to somebody, I heard it for the first time in 2003 on TBN. But as a parent, that causes a lot of problem for me because I'm trying to tell my kids, what Islam is, and now they're hearing all of this stuff from others, what Islam is, and I have to sort of help them understand that that is not Islam.
Mm.
And so that I think is a challenge. So having said that, going back to your question about the core beliefs, so Islam, for a long time, Muslim scholars have written a list of beliefs. So I'll start with that. They said that there are 6 faith beliefs, which is quite common with the other religions such as Christianity and Judaism, which is belief in one God, belief in messengers, his books, belief in angels, and belief in sort of God's control over the world, which we typically will name predestination, and the Day of Judgment. So those are the 6 core beliefs in Muslim faith. And then there are 5 practices that Islam, and this is also all very documented. Mm-hmm. So the 5 practices are stating by verbally that there is only one God and that Muhammad is his last prophet. Mm-hmm. The second one is praying. There's a particular way of praying. Every religion has some sort of a prayer.
Right.
So Islam has that too. Then there is, taking a portion out of your money for some noble causes.
Okay, so charity.
So it's charity, but it can be more than that because. But yeah, let's. I think that's a good generalization that more or less is similar to charity, and then there is fasting. And then there is one time, if possible, every Muslim should try to go and do, pilgrimage. It's called Hajj. So those are the 5 core practices. Now there is, I believe, there is a discussion about jihad, which is what all of these organizations and terrorists are typically using. But they were never included as part of the 6 core beliefs or as part of the 5, they call them pillars, which are the practices of Islam. The discussion about jihad is pretty much, in fact, I recently wrote an article about it. I actually just went and, took a school book from Pakistan where I studied Islam. And I said, you know what, let's just look what kids are being taught. And it's pretty much, the school books pretty much focus on either self-defense, or they are saying that jihad, which is the common term used by terrorists, is more about improving your inner soul. It's more about improving yourself, and or it's more about taking the side of the truth, trying to go and educate others about it. So those are the core beliefs. The only thing I add to that list personally, based on my study of Islam, is the persecution of anybody in the world means that other countries who are able should probably act. For example, genocide is a very good example. We in the United Nations and as a sort of a world community have decided that if there is a genocide and the people who are being persecuted ask for help, others should try to help them.
Absolutely.
And that's United Nations Charter of, I think it's a Charter on Genocide. And so I think I'll just add that to the list. I'll say, as Muslims should not differentiate. If that happens, Muslims should participate too and then try to help that. But other than that, Islam itself is that those are the core beliefs of the religion.
And much of what you talked about is connected to spirituality, and if within the work that I do and within the work that I also bring to this show, A Journey for Truth, is in exploring different levels of spirituality, but also that includes discovering different levels of our own knowingness, discovering different levels of life, and how different people choose to live their life, and how different people come to understand who they are and what they want to teach, and the awareness that they want to bring, and the healing work that they've done within themselves. So based on that, what awareness do you want to bring to the listeners? How can we as a whole promote awareness, promote love and kindness to everyone, regardless of their religion or the religion they associate with?
I think I think one thing that I've seen happen in the last few years, especially, and it was there since 2001 as well, is that we have kind of become separate communities. So whether it's TV, whether it's in our real life, many times we will hear people talking about them being Muslims, them being, African Americans, them being somebody else. And right. It's not us anymore. And so I think one thing that we, both my wife and I, we are trying to push in our children is that it's about we. We as a community are going to do something. We as a neighborhood are going to do something. And we have to start seeing past these lines. And I'll tell you, I'm guilty of that. I mean, given that, guilty of not doing that, given between, the work in the morning and, taking care of all the other chores. I mean, I know my neighbors, I, go and talk to them, but I'm really, as a neighborhood, I think my participation can increase a lot. At the same time, if, somebody else with a different belief, different sort of spiritual needs, different physical needs comes in my neighborhood, I also need to go and initiate that contact. So it's both ways, regardless of their religion, like whether you're living with a Christian or a Muslim or a Jewish or some other, faith, or your spiritual concepts are different. I think that is one thing that we have to do. So that is more about relationship building. The other thing is, I think the whole political correctness thing is a little bit good. Yet I think we're moving in a direction where, especially after this election, we are trying to throw it away. And that makes it very difficult for both for Muslims to help their communities if needed, as well as for us to raise our kids. And I think it's the latter that we are really worried about. And it seems selfish, but that is right now the challenge that we are facing. As our kids are growing up, my wife is worried about, should we teach them about violence? They should not know about violence, yet they are thrown in conversations where other kids or other adults are talking to them about violence. And so
it's difficult.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's difficult. It's difficult to raise kids in this day and age, I feel, because we have so much going on around us. We have the media portraying their information. We have social media sites that are portraying a lot of information. And we don't want our kids to be prone to violence. Most of us don't want our kids being prone to violence. We want to teach them peace. We want to teach them harmony. We want to teach them humanity. And what I see a lot within mainly the social media community is we're teaching our kids how to hate. We're teaching our kids exactly what you were talking about. We're teaching our kids that separation. That person's not okay because they're gay. That person's not okay because of the color of their skin. That person's not okay for whatever reason. And we're teaching that separation, which just continues to promote hate and then violence. So I completely understand your wife's concerns.
Yeah. And I think we were brought up, at some point in our lives, we were told that you have to differentiate between disagreeing with someone and hating someone. I can disagree with you on anything. That doesn't mean that has to translate into some sort of rhetoric that is hateful.
Right.
And so that, I think, is certainly a challenge right now for us. And certainly in order to bring the our kids up in an environment where they can learn to be part of the society, we have to do some extracurricular activities. Either that means we have to have play dates with people of different faiths, or we put them in some sort of social classes and environments where they'll get to know kids who are not like them. We might go and put them in piano class just so that they can interact with kids who might not be similar to them.
Right, exactly.
And so I think those are the avenues we are trying. But I think it's a challenge. I think it's something that, and I think everything we had learned about how to be in this society, so we are productive members, has suddenly changed after this last election and the campaign that preceded it. Because at this point, when I go and talk to my neighbor, I don't know if he thinks what I'm saying is right, or if he believes I'm actually lying to him and I have some other ulterior motive. Same thing with your viewers. I don't know how many of those will actually say, yeah, this guy actually is genuine. He's saying what he means, versus he's not really saying what he means. He's trying to, sort of hide something, and that's why he had this nice story and everything. And so once you are in a position where you feel you're doubted, every conversation becomes very hard to have. Like you lose the motivation to build those relationships. I mean, you have to persist, but that's what starts going through your mind.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Is that where you see us heading now that Trump has been elected? Do you see us continuing moving in that direction of separation and wanting to judge anyone who's either Muslim or may even look Muslim?
I think it's going to get worse because if you look at his cabinet and the kind of people he's picking up, some of them have certainly said things about Muslims that might even impact their First Amendment rights. As an example, it's been said that Islam is not a religion; it's an ideology. And once you start using that kind of language, you're basically implying that, therefore, Muslims don't have any religious protection because it's not really religion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, now it may not be true, and we may be reading too much into it, but these points have been raised on TV as well. That the minute you start using that language, how can I even argue it's a religion? Because now you have this whole discussion of it's not a religion, it's an ideology, and it's this or that, and so those are the people who are gonna get sworn in the next few months, and I think we'll have to wait and see. But it's the way we see it right now. I think it's we've had some serious discussions between my wife and myself whether we should stay or we should start considering relocating to another country. There are advantages and disadvantages, but that's where the conversations are heading. So I think that will give some idea of how much problematic it is right now.
Right, and I know this next comment I'm going to make may upset some people and some not, but I am seeing similarities between how people are responding to Trump's rhetoric and how people were responding before the Second World War to Hitler's rhetoric and the agenda that Hitler was pushing upon his population. Now, Hitler, of course, was a puppet. He was being controlled. He was being told what to say. But he was pushing also his own agenda onto the population. Well, I see Trump doing the same. And a lot of people are following it. And so they're engaging in this anger and this hate. And it's their fault we're having these issues. It's their fault we're having violence and more terrorist attacks. And I think that people forget to look inward, meaning look inside our own country, and ask how many Americans kill each other already on a daily basis. How many people are shooting each other regularly? And it's easy to blame those other people, so to speak, because then we can stay engaged in our fear and we don't need to take responsibility sometimes for our own actions. And that concerns me. It concerns me that it appears the history is repeating itself and that we lump certain people into a category and we say they don't have rights. So what you were just stating is very concerning.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's one difference between what Hitler was doing and what's good about this country is maybe I'll just talk about this country. But one very positive aspect is that people here are not, I should actually say, all people here are not blind. So you will always somehow this country always. And I think it's the people. So the people always come out of, the pits that we dig. Mm-hmm. This happened after Second World War, where what we did with Japanese, we realized it was wrong.
Right.
Same thing with African Americans. Right. We figured out that the whole civil rights movement and how it changed our legal system and our social setup and our political system. So I think there hope as well. But having said that, those things take a lot of time, and when you're going through it, it's very, very painful. So I think that's the fear part. So there's fear and there's hope.
Yes.
And both of them are, I think they go hand in hand.
I agree. I agree that there's always hope. There's always personal choice. We always can choose personally what we're going to participate in. And when I say it concerns me, what I say is it concerns me in terms of humanity and seeing where humanity is headed. And personally, I have a love for all humans. I think that all parts of humanity need to be honored and respected. But you're right, there's always hope and there's always a choice to go into fear or not. So that was wonderful. Well, Omer, do you want to give your blog site so people can visit that?
Yeah, it's www.omeriqbal.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Omer, for being a guest on my show this week.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, listeners, for joining me here as well on Journey for Truth on iHeartRadio and YouTube. Until next time, have a fantastic week.